Oh boy, I saved it. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well today. Seemed like we was just here yesterday. uh, today is um, n- today is November the 4th, 2020. We're here today for our special call meeting. Today we want to discuss some things with the IDA. I want to go ahead and officially call this meeting to order tonight. I'm going to ask tonight if um, Commissioner Edwards, if you would lead us in our invocation, and Commissioner Mason, if you would lead us in our pledge.
Thank you. If everyone would bow their heads, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for another day. We thank you for the opportunity to live in this country which is free. We thank you for we thank you for the opportunity to make a decision, the decisions we made yesterday, Lord. We ask that you would guide us and direct us and keep you in everything that we do. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Mason. Next, I have the agenda adoption. I seek a motion that we adopt this agenda, please. It's been motioned by Commissioner Mason and second by Commissioner Schultz. Any discussion? All in favor? It passes 5-0. The first thing on the agenda is consideration approval of intergovernmental agreement. Intergovernmental contract with the Newton County Industrial Development Authority relating to insurance of the Stanton Grove bond. Before we do that, we're going to allow Sarah Hall to come and present on behalf of the IDA.
Good evening. Commissioners, I'm going to take this off. All right. Well, good evening, and thank you again for coming back tonight to discuss this topic. I agree with the chairman. It feels like we were just here. And so I am here on behalf of the Newton County Industrial Development Authority tonight to discuss the discussion of bonds. And I think many of you understand and realize the history of the Newton County Industrial Development Authority. Our development authority here in Newton County has been established since the early 60s, and we have seen projects through in fruition of projects such as General Mills, Bridgestone Golf, Nishimbo Automotive, SKC, Fiber Visions, Bard, and many, many more. The history that is within our Newton County Industrial Development Authority is long and also encompasses the great work that many of you have done around this horseshoe and through support of projects and to make Newton County what it is today. Through projects, through tax base, as well as jobs and job creation throughout our community. And so one of the slides that I want to show you today is to kind of talking about major economic development sites and sites that we look at through the Newton County Industrial Development Authority. Starting to your left in is one of our newest projects on the west side of town, which is Lidl, mentioned in topic A that you see along I-20. So our work for the Newton County Industrial Development Authority to recruit in jobs, to recruit in investment, to grow the tax base, to be able to have longevity and long-standing companies here in our community that offer our citizens here great opportunities and prosperity for them to continue living in our home and doing great work each and every day. As you move toward the center of the screen, you look at Covington, and then you have products, again, as mentioned, General Mills, SKC, and through that bond and partnership, we were able to have companies now that have hit anniversary years, such as 20, 30, and Fiber Visions recently that hit over 50 years that they have been in our community and formerly known as Mobile. As you go further east out to exit 101, you will then see some kind of ghosted areas that is located there. Many of you are familiar with the product of Stanton Springs. And Stanton Springs, many of you, Commissioner Henderson reminds it often of Chairman Morgan and the idea and yourself sitting around this horseshoe with the vision and the thought of bringing together 1,600 acres for the prosperity of new jobs and the great jobs that we could have in our community outside of Atlanta. And that's what you see today out at Stanton Springs. The other kind of areas that you see is in partnership with our community partners, such as Walton County, as East Atlanta's megasite, Stanton Grove's megasite, as well as the historic Heartland megasite. And those prospects that we've identified as great economic development drivers for our community, as well as the state of Georgia and even the Southeast. So we talked about Stanton Springs. And I think you all are familiar with the fact that Stanton Springs now hosts and is the home to 2 Fortune 500 companies, Facebook and formerly Baxter, now Takeda. That doesn't happen in many communities without planning, without vision, and without commitment to long-term economic growth. So today, and in the request, and as the chairman mentioned, is the consideration of this intergovernmental agreement and the consideration of being a guarantee and a guarantor of bonds that we are looking to acquire and for purchasing Stanton Grove. Stanton Grove is approximately across the street north of Stanton Springs off of exit 101. It is approximately 305 acres, all within Newton County. You see there is a portion, and not to get confused, that is in Walton County. We are not purchasing the Walton County tract, only the Newton tract, that is that 305 acres. It has interstate frontage as well as access to the interchange along the area. We have found it to be one of our most premier and driving sites when we show for prospects, along with the partnership of our other park at Stanton Springs and around that whole area of exit 101. And so with that, we feel that the timing and the atmosphere is right to do what we do in Newton County and take it to the next level. Take it to the next level and build a product that, again, looks and becomes that sister and complementary site that we have in Stanton Springs. Looking to put in infrastructure, looking to work with our partners, such as the Newton County Water and Sewage Authority, to add in water and sewer lines that can handle companies and growth of companies such as a Takeda, a Facebook, and be able to put in more quality jobs and more investment to help grow our tax base in that business aspect and make a premier ending to Newton County as you head along I-20. So tonight we ask for your consideration to guarantee and support the Newton County Industrial Development Authority in these bonds. The Newton County Industrial Development Authority met this morning and did approve all documents that you see here today. And so we are asking for your consideration to continue the legacy that we have out at Exit 101, continue the support that we have from partners in and around our region, as well as the state of Georgia, and continue the legacy of creating the state of Georgia as the #1 state for business. And we want to be a part of that, and we're asking for your consideration tonight. So I'll take questions or anything.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for presenting tonight. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sarah. So,
Yes, sir.
Outline for those, for everyone here, what the price tag, the terms, if you would, just a high level.
Yes, sir. We are looking to entertain a bond for $16.1 million total. $16.1 million. The total cost, and I will show you and flip here. So give me 1 second, maybe. I don't know if you can read that on your screen. But again, approximately 305 acres at $40,000 an acre. That gives you at $12,202,000, I think $800 as a total cost there. Then the second phase, in placing in that $16 million, is approximately $3 million in infrastructure work. We are partnering with the Newton County Water and Sewage Authority for infrastructure. We are looking, they are going to help us with putting in a water line that will, again, host companies as large as potentially a Facebook, a Takeda, or a General Mills that can go there in adequate size. And then we are going to partner with helping support a new sewer line that would run along adjacent to I-20 in this as our partnership. As well as when you enter Stanton Springs, one of the things that is remarkable about Stanton Springs is the entrance point. When you come in and you see a 4-lane boulevard, a very nice brick entryway, we are looking to work with GDOT to determine the guaranteed entryway is also placing in the beginning of a new boulevard. Again, the thought being that sister complementary site that when you get off, it looks like a true high-end business park. So at the end of the day, and then encompassing your closing costs, your bond costs, that brings you to the total of $16.1 million.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Sarah. So, and the payback of these bonds, what's the timeline on those bonds, and who's responsible for those?
Yes, sir.
The primary responsibility.
Great question. So I want to give you what my answer is, but I also want to remind you and share, tell you that we have Brian Husky here tonight. Also, too, I know many of you are familiar with Brian, and if I don't do this question justice on answering about the bond payback or even the terms of this, be happy to allow Brian to do that. So we have petitioned out, and Brian has done magic and wonders and has brought us back a 15-year term on the bond. So looking at beginning in 2020, going to 2035, our interest rate on that would be 2.17%. And if you look in your top area on your screen here, it gives you the debt service payback per year across the top. And then in the blue is the projected revenue and income from the IDA and what we currently have in hand. And as you notice, and as we have discussed, the first entity that would also take sole responsibility of payments and paying the debt service would be fully the Industrial Development Authority. To date, what you can see in the year 2021, we have a little over $2 million. And that we are looking that the only time we would come back to you is that if we did not have revenue coming within the IDA of some sort, whether it was through land sales or other kind of bond fees or any kind of program of sorts. And within your agreement, it talks about that any land sale revenue would then turn back to debt service. But who is on the price is the Development Authority, and then you all would be the guarantee back. When you look at the projection here, the amount of money and based on the debt service payment, we would not potentially come back to you until the end of the year of 2024, beginning of year 2025. So it would be almost 5 years before we would potentially come back to the county for any type of funding support or services whatsoever. Also, let me remind you that in this blue, we were very conservative. This does not include any future land sales. This is only what we have in hand today. So this number could actually stretch out further than 2025 if we do have land sales. We are, and we can say today, and when I say we, the Industrial Development Authority is fully aware that we have a good number of prospects that are interested in this site, that we do feel confident that in the next year or 2 years that we will have significant land sales that will continue out to that funding source. So I hope that answered your question. If it gave you enough, if not, I'm happy to bring Brian or give more clue in about that.
Well, that answered my question. I have a question for Lloyd now, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Lloyd, in 2025, if the IDA had to come back to us to help support the bond repayment, where would we get those funds?
Well, what we would need to do, if it appeared that we would need to support that, it would have to be a budgeted item, and it would have to come out of the general fund. So at that point, as we move closer to 2020, as we move closer to 2025, I think we'd have to do an analysis on where we were and on what the proceeds are, or the record of proceeds that have come from any sales that may have occurred on the property. And then we'd also would need to take into account the prospect of future sales or any pending sales to determine whether or not there would be enough money there for the IDA to make that payment. But if the county needed to make the payment, then it would have to come out of the tax revenues, and which would be out of the general fund.
So, and also, I know we had talked before about proceeds from Facebook, pilot, some of the pilot money,
Right.
and then some of the proceeds from the payments that Takeda have started to make.
Correct.
We have already incorporated those funds for the last 2 fiscal years into our existing budgets, right? Into the last 2 budgets, right?
Correct. Any funds that we have received from those 2 properties have been included in the total digest.
So those
yeah.
proceeds are already spoken for.
Currently, yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Commissioner Schultz?
This question is actually for Sam. I've been reading the documents, and I just need you to explain to me the millage cap and how that factors into this, and what we need to be prepared for as a board in terms of that millage cap. I don't understand that.
So normally, we would be limited, or I guess prohibited, from doing economic development projects with general county funds, because that's not typically considered a county purpose. But there's a provision in the code that says you can take up to 1 mil of your tax and devote it to economic development purposes, chiefly by giving it to the IDA, which will then handle the details. So this is really just 1 mil of your overall tax revenues. I think Brittany's in the back, and she can tell us maybe what 1 mil is, but I think it's well in excess of the maximum amount we would pay on this bond in any year, which is, I think, 1.5 million. So the short answer to your question is this reference to millage is sort of just the legal justification for our doing this.
So does let's just assume that we get to year 2025 and the Board of Commissioners has to back this bond, then do you have to have advertising on the tax bill that this is an economic development millage that's paying for it, so that there's transparency that shows that that's where the payment is coming from, or can it come out of the general fund?
I believe it can just come from the general fund, but because I'm not 100% certain of all the hoops you'd have to jump through, I can look into that now and get you an answer.
I think that would be helpful, because I think that that's something that, you know, if that's going to have to go on a tax bill, the public will need, you know, of course that's 5 years from now, but still, I think that that's something that we need to understand. And then the other question that I have, and I guess it's really for the IDA, when we're going to be entering into an intergovernmental agreement, but when we get to the point where the Board of Commissioners has to make that bond payment, does the Board of Commissioners have any kind of lien on the property, own the property? What is or is that still in the IDA's hands, and the Board of Commissioners has no real legal ownership of that property? I don't know who could answer that.
Sorry, when you said it was for the IDA, I sort of stopped.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I just, if the Board of Commissioners has to come forth and make that bond payment, you're backing the bonds, but what does the Board of Commissioners have any legal ownership of that property at that point in time? Is the Board of Commissioners do they hold a lien on it because they're making that that payment?
It wouldn't be a lien technically, but we would have a contractual claim that we could litigate against the IDA if they failed to repay us. That's what this second agreement is. So insofar as the IDA has this as an asset and we have a valid legal claim against them, then that is an asset that we could use to satisfy that claim.
So the assumption is that we will back the bond, but they'll pay us back. But if they don't pay us back, we have a legal remedy to make sure that we have some way of getting that money back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I needed to know. Well, I just needed to know that we had that legal.
You have to incur litigation expense to sue.
Which is not a pretty thing. That would not be a pretty one Newton kind of thing to do, but we do have that legal remedy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And say we just thank you for all the work you do. I know you are a hard-working young lady. And, you know, it's good because a hard-working old man who used to be a young man, a hard-working young man. And you mentioned the fact that on the board, I think Dave Morgan, he was the chairman. He was, which he was. I don't think I know that. He was the chairman, and what sold me on the idea it was the fact that Stand Spring was supposed to be the eye of all of Georgia and perhaps the new United States, because you brought counties together to work together, which was really good. I mean, I thought it was great. But what more impressed me more then was, back then, if my memory serves me right, it was the fact that we talked about the money that would be put back into the taxpayers' bucket, and whereas their taxes would go down. And I was hearing Lord say a few minutes ago, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that some of those money was already encumbered or put back into the general fund. I think Stan said a little bit about that, in which that's good. But if my memory serves me right, and I stand to be corrected, that we did a rollback. Am I right? Legal? We did a rollback in our prior budget. We did a rollback. But anyway, since nobody probably knows about the rollback, in which it is that some of the citizens, or a good portion of the citizens, still has to pay higher taxes. And I just thought at the time, and I didn't support the budget, I thought at the time that was just a little too much for the, at this time in the call vote 19, that you had to pay any taxes, that we should have tried our very best to be zero tax fees. But I said all that just to say this, was that shouldn't we be trying to, since it seemed to be giving back to the community, a possibility of giving back money to the taxpayers in Newton County, shouldn't we be thinking about what ways that we could give money back to them? And then we seem to be getting a little bit and make them feel good about the years that we struggled. Because I know a few years that I got a whole lot of calls and people saying, well, y'all just took the taxpayer money and throw it away. And now that it's making somewhat of money because of we attracted larger companies and Facebook, et cetera. Shouldn't we be trying to give something back to the community? And so that's what, in my little mind, I'm thinking, I think we should be working, trying to give back to our community, back to our citizens, and making decreasing the tax burden, taking money off so they could pay less rather than pay more, and especially in a time of need. And if you think about it, and I have thought a little bit about it, people are still struggling. My neighbors are struggling. In the community, we have kids come to the community center because their parents are scared they may go to school and catch the corona. And so there's a whole lot of going on. And it seems to me right now we're trying to buy instead of trying to save or trying to help spread in our community. And then we've had a few of them non-truths about we're going to help and prosper on small businesses. I know I'm going to tangent, and we haven't did anything for the small businesses here in Covington. So, I'm open, but at the same time, I just you know, I think that we should be thinking more of trying to give back rather than constantly thinking of spending. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cowell. And then Commissioner Mason. You didn't, yeah, Commissioner Cowell?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah, I do appreciate what you and Dave do. It's good to have y'all as part of the Newton County family. Appreciate Frank Turner Jr. from what he does with IDA and all the members of the IDA. I think they've done a great job in Newton County. And for me, I just want to let everybody know I support the economic development for the county. But I always come back to the question that I was given when I was sworn in, and that is, I've got to do what's in the best interest of the county. And this project here, you know, it's just one of those things that has given me a little bit of heartburn. My first thing is the price I think is too high. If it had been lower, it would have sold sooner. And if you look at the records, it's been on the books for quite a while. So I think the pricing is probably too high. That seems to be supported by the appraisal that we got. Yeah, I understand there's some ways to view appraisals and different things like that too. But overall, I think the pricing is too high. Of course, I think the appraisal's too high also, but that's just me. The question of what you're asking us to do is be a guarantor on the bonds. That's another one of those things that gives me heartburn, to co-sign a note for somebody and be a guarantor. I just, you know, for me on a personal basis, that's not a good business practice. And I still got some concern with the competition we got with Stanton Springs right across the road over there. That's a 4-county industrial park that it took nearly 10 or 15 years. It took a long time before that even got some interest on board from Takeda or Baxter at the time. So it sat there a while. It was a lot of, I felt like the county does not need to get into land speculation, and I think this is a land speculation deal. My other concern is when you ask for us to bond something, you know, and Brittany, I may be wrong, but I think we're going to have to show this as a contingent liability on our books. The liability will be there, but there won't be an asset to offset that. I mean, the asset's going to belong to the Industrial Development Authority. We're just going to be responsible for the debt. So that's a concern. And, you know, we're down now to 305 acres. It was earlier it was 333, I think, to start with. Then we said there's 296 usable acres. That brings it down, even with the development cost at 305 acres at 61, that's $53,000 an acre. And that's just too rich for me. I mean, that's too big. It's just too expensive for me. And I understand the development costs and everything that have to be put in there. So this is one of those things, and I appreciate Sam and Frank and all y'all's work, everybody's work on this. But I just feel like I have to walk away from that deal. I can't support that deal. So thank y'all for your efforts and everything.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing this to our attention for consideration. I have a couple questions. I'm not sure if you're able to answer them or which party would answer them. My first question is it possible for it to be stated or explained to us generally what is the average revenue that's generated from the IDA, say on an annual basis, if you're able to determine that, or if it changes just depending on, like you talked about, land deals and things like that, which will generate that revenue for the IDA. So I'm sure it will it's probably not consistent, but I don't know if you all have looked at that from, I'm sure you probably have, from a historical perspective. Well, how much revenue is the IDA generating on an annual basis? And then once you look at what they are generating on an annual basis, do we foresee a positive return on investment? So if we move into this intergovernmental agreement, do you all foresee that you're going to have a major return on the investment from the projects that are going to come from investing in this particular product at that particular point? And will that investment help generate the revenue that will allow the IDA to take care of those additional 10 years where the Board of Commissioners will never have to come in and pay at all, ever, for those 15 years? And secondly, will those projects help generate, I guess, revenue where we can help save our citizens, because we always want to try to find a way where, when we look at economic development, our objective should be that we're bringing in development that's going to provide a level of relief for our citizens. And so to me, I think that's always the objective of economically developing our community. So did that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And I'm going to try to tackle all three points.
Thank you.
All right. So first, I want to make it clear that, and as you all know, this is the first year for there to be staff on the Industrial Development Authority. So history of revenue coming into the Development Authority, while I am aware, I am probably not the most privy, and Frank is here too, they probably can't be the most idea. But as you notice in the blue box, what's under fiscal year 21 is that we do have SPLOST. So the majority of our funding this year came from the 2017 SPLOST that we have from a revenue source that was committed to us. Over time period, way that the IDA would incur revenue is through bonds, transactions of other projects that we have done, such as Lidl or even incentives of other sorts and bonding fees that we work through, or even land sales. We believe that to date in fiscal year 21, due to what we have saved over time and the revenue that we have brought in, and to answer your second point, is that we believe that return on investment, at least for 5 years, standing alone without any sales, is an incredible return on investment. And so the difference, I think, between Stanton Springs and when it was brought into fruition and to the point of land prospecting is that the cost was coming back to the general funds of the counties without really having the pool of money that we have today already set up. It was already coming out of the general fund, and the commitment of funds at that time was coming from the taxpayer immediately. These funds that are coming today and going at least stretching until 5 years from now have come from either land sales, other bonding fees, or transactions, or SPLOST in 2017 that it was earmarked for economic development purposes. And the purpose of that we can utilize in this SPLOST funds is to give back to the community in a way of economic driving, of jobs, business creation, adding to the tax base. We want to make sure that we're not just buying land to hold off of the tax digest, but we're buying land to then in turn give to citizens or businesses that we can then turn into tax revenue. And at the same time, where it's a difference of Stanton Springs between now and again, yes, it sat for many years, and we like to say that, you know, our marketability over the years has very much changed. Our aggressiveness to go after companies has changed. Also, and I think Commissioner Henderson said it right, the vision of it being a global footprint of an industrial park is certainly here today. And because of that, why we think all eyes are here because of something impactful like Stanton Springs is that we see the potential and the return on investment potential from looking at Stanton Grove. And so we do absolutely believe that encouragement of new businesses, revenue coming in and sustaining, because our goal, and on behalf of the Development Authority, we don't want to come back and ask for money. We want to be self-sustaining, and at least for 5 years and beyond some, we believe that we're automatically self-sustaining and believe that we do not want to be a land bank. We want to get it back on the digest. If you remember, approximately about a year ago, Dave and I met with each of you over at the center, and we did a year-long progression, and we brought up our tax digest and the difference between business versus residential. And you remember the pendulum, how heavy it was in that residential feature there on businesses. And to your point, Commissioner Mason, that is our goal and what we want to do with Stanton Grove, is we want to look and making that point where we're taking that off of our citizens of a residential tax base and bringing an industry that will then pay and pay down to help our tax digest from a business sense. We need to balance that much better, and we believe through a site like Stanton Grove, also through the success and the attention that we've had within Stanton Springs and that area and through Newton County, that we're able to bring in more prospects. We believe that this is the way to do that. From a regional standpoint, this is something that we want to continue our regionalism, whether or not it's in Newton County or Walton County or anywhere else, but our goal is to continue being regional for the I-20 East corridor for the state of Georgia. And that's our goal in this, is to kind of balance that out, to take the relief off of the residents that live here and bring in the business that we want to encourage that business aspect. But to do that, we have to build premier parks. And we believe that we have the revenue source today, that we're not going to come out of the general digest to ask for this, but we have it in our hands to be able to give back to the community in a way through jobs and lowering the tax base. Commissioner Henderson brought up the rollback rate. We certainly did that through Facebook revenue. Our goal is to continue doing that. And I know in your budget this year, you continue to cut back from the budget. And if you look at the darker orange item, you look at potential Stanton Springs revenue. That is also a conservative number from Takeda and as well as Facebook that will incur up until 2027, until 2028. It was over $2 million alone from Stanton Springs. And think of the future and really the legacy that could be built if you had 2 parks making that type of money and what that could be brought in business versus in residential. On your third part, and I hope that answers that question. So I think our goal in this complex of the 305 acres, and again, I apologize if it was misconstrued a little bit, is that the whole track is 330, but there is a Walton track piece that we are not purchasing that is on the north side. It's only the 305, but the goal of that is to drive business, be the sister site, the complementary site of what we have, and encouraging growth, positive economic growth for the eastern side of the community and for jobs for our entire region.
Thank you, sir, for explaining that. And I just want to commend our economic development team, our IDA. I think this board has to begin to really look at economic development from a bigger picture perspective. And I don't think this board should create a level of hesitation. I don't think this board should create ways to prevent us from economically developing within this county, because what's going to happen is you have to think long-term and not think short-term. And I think sometimes we as board members, we think of the right now. Well, how is it going to impact us financially right now? Well, if you are a good business-minded individual, you don't think about right now or short-term, you think about long-term. What is that ROI? So if I take a step and if I invest in something now, what is that going to do to bring back a higher rate of investment to the community where it's going to positively impact the community as a whole? So I think we should really begin to look at the bigger picture and not look at the smaller picture. And if we really want to aid our citizens, and if we really want to give back to our citizens, we have to focus on economic development. We cannot sit around and allow all of the land that we have that's so unused and think that we're going to continue to provide relief to our citizens if we never develop. And so I think we have to have a strategy, and I think our economic development team and our industrial, our IDA, do a great job of doing that. And so we've got to partner with you all to make that happen. So thank you. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, all right, Sarah, so how many acres do we have still available in Staten Springs?
Let's see if I can go back. Might not be the best image. Since the JDA opened up, I was not, I apologize. Since the JDA opened up the new back portion of the park, we have approximately 540 acres left. But I will say that we've had a history of large projects. So in one quick swoop, that could easily be obtained, especially for Stanton Springs. Facebook has taken 416 acres, and then Takeda's over 185 acres. So 540.
So, do you ever foresee if the Staten Springs property remains available, do you ever foresee the Stanton Grove property competing with Staten Springs for a client?
I don't know if the word is compete, and I'll phrase this. So I think you are all familiar that about 3 or 4 years ago, Stanton Springs designated Shane Short and myself as the recruitment arm for Stanton Springs. Newton and Walton County own the majority of the park, and so we are the recruitment arm to site selections, to global leaders. And we have an underlying agreement at Stanton Springs that talks about recruitment. But if we receive a project or an RFI request here in Newton and also in Stanton Springs, that one of us would step back. Stanton Springs, and the chairman sitting on the group can really attest to this as well, is that their focus is heavy into biotech and now high tech. I think that the role of Stanton Grove would be a significant complementary aspect to that, but also not in a competition point. There are a lot of things that even at Stanton Springs or Stanton Grove that I think that can be complementary and not really something that can be against. There's a lot of factors that the JDA has either looked at projects, turned them away, turned them down, that didn't fit, that could have fit over at the other side, or vice versa. So I do not. I think there's also a different aspect. The 540 acres does not have the interstate access and the ramp and visibility to say as this site does. I think there's different factors for both and why they are unique, and I think that that is a complementary piece rather than a competition.
Another question, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. So, what would you envision at Stanton Grove? What type of projects would you envision there, just off the top of your head?
So in Newton County, Dave and I, we recruit after 4 main targeted industries. Obviously, biotech, high tech. I don't think that in any shape or form we would not look at potentially maybe a data center. Something that didn't want 400 acres, maybe that wanted 100 acres, or even 300 that couldn't fit here for whatever reason. We also go after advanced manufacturing. That is something that really isn't in the wheelhouse of the JDA. And when we talk about advanced manufacturing, that might be a General Mills. It could be a Bridgestone Golf. It could be a Nishimbo. So I definitely think that that aspect could be a potential of looking at that. Also, too, office space, corporate headquarter solutions. When you are across the street from 2 Fortune 500 companies, and it is well known that we go into different places around the country and they go, you're the place that got the new Facebook site of Georgia or the Southeast, or you have the only Takeda facility in the South, and they know that. I think it means something. So those two, I would say that, we don't envision, I can tell you this, we don't envision and we don't really primarily recruit or go after heavy warehouse and industrial, not really distribution. The difference in Lidl and others is because that distribution was a regional headquarters. That is our southeastern regional headquarters of a corporation here, and has higher end wage jobs and is not just a distribution center. So those are things I don't view them as. Also too, I don't view them as things that will emit a great deal of odor, noises, things like that. Yes, you're on the interstate, but that's not who we need to be as Newton County right now and who we want to be.
Kind of like truck stops, right? Just kidding. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sarah.
Wow. Commissioner Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Sarah, a lot of us have done the economic development certification, and often we're told that one of the best ways to recruit a business is to give the land. So let's just assume that based on the bond amount of $16,100,000 and 305 acres, that makes each acre about $52,000. So if you can't sell that land for $52,000, but you have to give it away to attract the business, what other ways are you, what other tools are in your toolbox to be able to generate that return so that you have that money to be able to pay the Board of Commissioners back?
Sure. Well, and I don't know, it's paying the bonds back,
Well,
correct? To paying off the debt service.
To paying off the debt
Yes.
service, I'm sorry.
Okay, so, no, you're fine.
Because we're assuming that you're gonna just roll the money over, and then but at some point, you may have to pay the Board of Commissioners back.
That's great. So first and foremost, our ultimate goal in this, and yes, it is a strategy to give away land. Knock on wood, we haven't given away land in a long time. I think that where our unique aspect is here in Newton County, we have had the luxury and also potential of what you've done for growth, and again, that legacy and vision for the long-term aspect that we've been able to sell our land and sell it at a premium price. There is a potential that that could happen. I think that all comes in the art of negotiation of the deal, whether it is paid back through something as similar as where you have pilot payments, or through tax agreements, or documents of some sort. We could also make tax allocation areas that come into that site. There's a multitude of ways to think about how to pay that debt service beyond that if we do have to give away land. Also, too, why the site itself, and in this consideration, if you look at this here, the reddish area, we look to potentially be commercial land. And when I say commercial, it could be driven as that mixed-use type of commercial. It could be, we have whether it is hospitality, or it is going back to that office complex or office space, or even the blue that would be industrial in this. And so I think we have a diverse kind of mix in this master plan that we could look at for potential revenue sources.
So a couple of these properties are not properties that would be owned by
That's right.
The little teeth here.
That's right. The little teeth, we do not have included within.
All right, so, Brittany, my next question is for you, and that's, how many bonds do we currently have? How many bonds are currently, included in the Board of Commissioners, debt sheet? How much, total, you don't have to tell me how many, the total bonds is 68 million, is that correct? Total bond is 68 million without this 16 million?
Yeah, that 16 million is not.
But I mean, that's the total that we have currently is 68 million.
Somewhere around there, rough numbers. I can email you more of a copy of the.
And is there a threshold in terms of our bond rating for when we get above a certain number of a certain dollar amount in total bonds? I guess that's a Brian Husky question.
Typically, they look at debt as part of the entire analysis, but based on the last review that you all undertook, they're comfortable with the definition of the county at this point in time.
But if there's this 16 million that's added based on the fact that we're guaranteeing the bond, how's that going to affect our bond rating?
They take into account the proposed repayment stream and how it fits in with the general finances of the county. I think that when they would look at it, it would come into a factor, and they would obviously, view that as a potential liability of the county. But I think they also weigh that against whatever land sales are going on, or whatever other mechanisms you're looking at to pay it with.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Commissioner Carroll.
Just one more comment. We worked really hard to get our bond rating improved, okay, and it went up last year, so we got some improvement on that. You're gonna add bonded debt to this, and it's It's not that, phantom bond stuff, this is general obligation debt. And you really don't have an asset to offset that liability. You've got a cash flow, hopefully, but it's speculative. And that's gonna, to me, that, you know, if I work really hard over the last 3 years to get our finances and straightened out, I don't wanna see it impacted by this or some other type project like this. That's my thoughts.
Anyone else? Thank you. So guys, we, about 5 months ago, 4 months ago, we, had a few issues with, our economic development here in the county. We went through a transition and, you know, this board decided that we was gonna pull economic development and we were gonna help push economic development. And so we decided we were gonna allocate funds to the IDA to help with economic development here in our county. So we got to think about that when we say, hey, do we want to say, hey, IDA, you guys just keep doing what you're doing, or do you want the economic development to grow? And I would suggest to you that if you invest, I think it was what, how much we put, $500,000, over almost $500,000 towards economic development. I think you should want that economic development to grow in your community. You got to try to get a return off your investment. So Sarah, if you could talk, and I know we got to go get on moving here, but if you could you talk to the point of how this would help economic development grow here in our community, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chairman. And again, thank you for the commitment to the Development Authority. And I think that, you know, in mine and Dave's opinion on the commitment to the Development Authority is to do what we're doing right now, bring you potential prospects and ideas that we feel that are going to push us into the growth of economic development and prosperity here. One of the things that we have not discussed at this moment is that our current industrial use and where we are today. At this moment in time, we do not have available buildings in Newton County or Covington for industrial growth. I have a half of one, okay? A half of one that's already kind of leased out. Our industrial park of Lockridge is completely full. Chamisa is completely full. Atlanta Highway is pretty much full except for some damaged area. And so as this would be a new aspect, as mentioned and talked about, and why Stanton Springs now has the reputation that it does. And for each of you, I'm sure you have seen, and that when you go to places and say you're with the Newton County Board of Commissioners, they know Stanton Springs and they know what's going on, and you know the history and the reputation that you have for working together for not only together here, but economic prosperity. And we want to continue, again, that legacy and why this would put us in the forefront. Today, we are working, and we work often with other property owners and individuals or even businesses to help market and work through the site. Today, this is a piece of why Stanton Springs makes sense, because it is a control. We are able to control our own destiny, market our own destiny. At Stanton Springs, we want to do the same thing for Stanton Grove. We don't want to continue doing it on behalf. We feel like, and with the appraisal coming back, we are under market value in what we have. We also feel that with the prospects that we are looking at, this is one of the sites that we submit the most often. And this is one of the sites that we have that is the size of this site, and not just aspects that are within an industrial park or elsewhere. And I think to that commitment, our next level piece in pushing economic growth is that, again,
Sell the product, and if you don't have product, you can't grow your economic development. But the burning question for me is, the land is there, so it's not going anywhere. why does the IDA have to own it? Why can't you just promote it for the owners that own the land? Why does it need to be under the ownership of the IDA and backed by a bond? I mean, I just, you have to convince me of why that's necessary.
Yes, ma'am. Well, and first off, I appreciate you for going and attending those classes, because you're right. It is always brought up that, you know, the aspect of owning your own land or controlling that, and I think it goes back to you're developing what your own destiny is. Yes, we have an outstanding partner with this property owner. We have held options with him for over 4 years now, and has worked together very well to work on the site. That property owner has also spent a great deal of money on environmentals for the site. But at the same time, at the end of the day, when we go and bring a prospect there, it's really that property owner's choice whether or not they want to move forward with potentially selling it or not selling it. No matter how much we like the prospect or we want to have them here or we feel that it fits our product mix, at the end of the day, that is their control versus ours. And I think we have we want to make sure that the ultimate decision of who and what type of business we bring into our product mix is ultimately at the control and the partnership between the Development Authority and Newton County and you guys. As we talked about those target industries, we want to make sure that it's something that comes in that we're all proud of and what we are all working toward in that effort, and not something that someone else that's outside of this really states yes or no. At the same time, I think that we want to make sure when we're looking and placing, to your point about incentives or price tags or anything else and how we negotiate, I think it's important that we work to help control, along with you all, and in the chairman sitting on the Development Authority, we control our destiny about incentives and pricing and details on how we work through those aspects and make sure that we are placing the product that we want to see out there that's the correct product at the correct time. And so I think, again, to go back to you, what is taking us to the next level, what could take us to the next step to continue seeing quality companies, products coming in, really shaping that eastern end of the community, this would be the reason why. And I think that we are now at the stage that we have the potential, we have the funding source to be able to do this and the wherewithal to do this and the interest of companies and others to be able to pick and choose truly what we want to see there versus somebody else do it for us. Hope that helps to answer too.
It's just a big price tag. But I think what I hear you saying is that big price tag allows us to control the product.
That's correct.
Guys, anything else before I call for a motion?
Frank Jr. Frank, you got just a second? Okay, if we want this deal to go through, is it possible for the county to buy a portion of that land and then the IDA buy the other portion with a bonding? We could just pay cash. I'd rather, for me, just in my experiences with commercial properties, and you know some of that background I've had, I'd rather just buy some of it out cash and own it by the county, and then the IDA can buy around it and we can develop it together. We can come up with a plan for the development together. But if we're throwing cash out there right now, Andy may take, I'm sorry, Mr. Shipp may take that. Okay. But there's nothing illegal with that. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. Thanks. That's an option. I'm just throwing that out there for y'all to think about.
You need something? Go ahead, Sam.
I just want to add, without disagreeing with that point, when the county disposes of real property, typically, outside of extraordinary circumstances, it has to sell it to the highest bidder. So if we were buying this property with the eye toward selling it to the right bidder, that might get in the way. I'm not saying it couldn't be arranged, but that might be just a stumbling block there.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Sarah?
The only other thing that I have to say is, again, you know, we appreciate your time and your consideration, and that we also appreciate the fact of, and it makes me proud to hear each of you speak highly of economic development. I appreciate each of you for going to the classes, going and attending things, coming to sit with Dave and I. And I think, again, that just shows the partnership here, as well as what we're capable to do. And at the end of the day, our goal is to continue pushing and driving more deals of the year. We've got them right now. We've had them and recognized here in the state of Georgia and in the South, and that's what we want to continue building, that legacy, and the legacy to continue on the eastern portion of the county. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Guys, you had an opportunity to hear a lot of discussion tonight. I seek a motion, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the preamble or the recitals of this first agreement, section I, it mentions 335 acres. In any motion, I would just request that we approve this to say approximately 305 acres. I don't know how that got past everyone, but it's 305. Yep.
The only thing that I have to say on that is that, in line with the land, is that if we move forward, we will be working toward a survey, an official survey that we own, to identify the exact approximation to give you that language.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback on that, you're right, it certainly shouldn't be what it says now, maybe 305 plus or minus, because it could go up or down 2 or 3 acres.
Right, and we don't really believe that it's gonna change that much, but we, that plus or minus, like you say.
So approximately 305 would be okay?
Yeah, I think 305 plus or minus.
Yeah, 305 plus or minus 4 acres or something. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Sam. Guys, I seek a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mason.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the intergovernmental agreement contract with Newton County Industrial Development Authority, NCIDA, relating to issuance of Stanton Grove bonds with approximately 305 acres plus or minus 4 acres.
Thank you, sir. Can I get a second, please?
I will second it for purposes of discussion. Do you hear me? Second for purpose of discussion.
So you seconded the motion?
Yep.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been motioned by Commissioner Mason and second by Commissioner Schultz. Any discussion? Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, over the last 4 years, I have had a tendency to, even in my own personal life, I go to the worst case scenario first, and then work my way back to try to justify what I do. Our worst case scenario is the taxpayers have to take on this burden, and we don't, and it'd come from the general fund. I cannot see myself voting for an initiative that potentially loads our citizens, our taxpayers down with additional taxes when it's not for essential services. I just can't do it. Now, our economic development team, the IDA, they have, and Sarah was very enthusiastic and excited and passionate. They have done exactly what we want them to do, bring us initiatives to look at and possibly approve, disapprove, whatever. But with the amount of acreage we have left at Stanton Springs, the interest we have there, you know, the big question for me is when we have these projects, and Takeda took off in 2012, and you guys heard me say this in a different session, and we've got that money now that's coming in and has relieved the taxpayers. And now we're going to try to encumber that money and take it right back away from them. And when it took a lot of convincing up front. I know when I sat on the school board, I saw the amount of money that Takeda would be paying at some point, and I remember thinking, well, that's lottery type money. That will really come in and help with our budget and relieve our taxpayers. And now we want to essentially take that money or that amount of money and tie it up on another project that may take another 12, I don't know how much, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. And it called me short-sighted. Tell me I have no vision. I'll wear those. But like Commissioner Cowan said earlier, I have to answer to my constituents, and that's potentially willingly putting more taxes on their shoulders is just not something I can do. And I understand return on investment. I've got an MBA. I know what return on investment is, but you have to separate. I have to separate what, and I have no doubt we will have a project very soon, but I can't. I'm not a risk taker. It's probably why I'll be lower middle class the rest of my life. But that's just the way I am, and it's the way I try to govern. And I appreciate what the IDA and the economic development team have done. But on behalf of the taxpayers in my district, I simply cannot support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Any more discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a firm believer that if you continue to do what you're currently doing, you're going to continue to get the same results. And I believe if things that come to this board, if we consistently find a way not to do it, we're going to remain in the state where we are always. If we never look at things outside of the box and we remain inside the box, the relief that we want to provide to our citizens, we will never be able to do it. We will always be at a back and forth on providing relief for our citizens. Instead of talking about it, let's be about doing the work of providing that relief to our citizens versus saying no to every single thing that comes to this board and not really looking at the big picture and how it's going to help us long term in the future. And I think if this board, and I'm not saying that this board shouldn't be rational, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't be, look at being good stewards, but I think if we really want to help our citizens, we have got to really focus on economic development. The way that we're going to give back to our citizens, the way we're going to lower taxes for our citizens is to allow industry to come in, allow retail to come in, allow commercial to come in, and they will take over that tax base. And as we allow these industry to come in to our community and our county, it's then going to begin to lower the taxes for our citizens. But if we always say no to every single thing that comes before us when it comes to economic development, because we're looking at the right now, we're always going to be in a struggle or a battle of, well, I want to get more for our citizens. I want to lower their taxes. But we're not doing the things that we need to do to lower the citizens' taxes. And so I just want to put that out there and just want us to keep in mind that the way that we lower the taxes for our citizens is bringing development, bringing commercial, bringing industry, bringing, these larger companies and businesses that can take on the higher tax base so that it can lower the tax base for our citizens. But if we deny every single thing that comes before us, we're always going to be in this battle and in this fight of our citizens paying more because we're not doing what it takes to lower the taxes for our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Lloyd, quick question before I go to the other commissioners. So I think the question was asked earlier, is the money spoken for that's coming from, Stanton Springs. That's, I mean, that's not the case, is it?
Well, pardon me. Currently, whatever revenues we collect from those properties, we include in the budget. So they are part of the general fund. They are part of our budget. Now, whether that would be the case 5 years down the road,
But
it would depend. There's a lot of variables in there. I mean, we have not said that those monies would necessarily, or that money would necessarily be accounted for 5 years from now, because there are some variables in there. For instance, we don't know what our LOST collections will be, or TAVT collections, which do have a bearing on that. It could be that it could be that we would have excess collections beyond what we need in our budget. So yeah. But as it stands right now, the money is used and is part of our budget.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Let me get Commissioner Schultz, and then I come back to you. Commissioner Schultz.
So, the point of doing this at this point, at this particular time, is because we have an option that we're trying to exercise the option, and the option will expire, correct? So, if the option expires, then the assumption is then the property will be sold for a different price to a different buyer. Or we could come back at a later point in time and purchase the property at a later point in time if we wanted to. It's just that we are using taxpayer dollars to exercise an option on a piece of property. Am I correct with that? Well, I know we're using IDA funds, but we're backing those funds. I mean, we're basically, the IDA is buying a house, and if you can't buy the house with your own money, we're co-signing the note. That's basically what it is. So, but the issue is that the urgency here is that the option is going to run out, and that's why we are at this point in time. Correct? Is that a correct assumption? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I have struggled with this because I do agree with Commissioner Mason that we have to take a risk, and we have to, if we don't take risks and be aggressive with economic development, we'll never have that option. We won't have the opportunity that it's the reward that goes along with that risk. High risk, high reward. But at this particular moment in time is what I struggle with, because we are at a very vulnerable time in terms of our nation in economy. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months and the next 6 months, and we certainly don't know how that's going to impact our taxpayers. Now, backing this bond, we're looking at 5 years down the road, but Commissioner Henderson and I can tell you, having sat on this board in 2009, it's taken till now to be able to have money where we felt at least somewhat comfortable. And so if we get into an economic crisis, or if we continue the economic crisis that we're headed towards, it could be 10 years before we get out of this. And so it really is a struggle for me to obligate taxpayers for a co-signing of a bond even though I understand that if you don't take risks, you don't get rewards many times. So I'm just, it's a real difficult dilemma for me to cast a vote on this. I will cast one, but it is a difficult one because it's of the uncertainty of the time in which we live.
Okay, I'm gonna come to Commissioner Mason in just a second. I don't know if you really, I don't know if Commissioner Mason meant taking a risk, but I'm hoping he meant as moving forward, as much as taking a risk. I don't know if it's taking a risk, but I think it's trying to move your economic development in your community forward. And I just, we said when COVID first came out, we was actually had started doing our budgeting talks, and there was a lot of talk saying that, hey, our numbers was going to decline, and we wanted the county manager and myself, y'all asked us to cut back, and we did, but our numbers never did decrease, and actually they increased. So I just don't see that downturn in the economy. Like, I don't know who's projecting that, but guys, I think you ought to think about that. Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talk about taxes a lot on this board, and if the data that's been provided to me, if it serves me correctly, the citizens in District 2 pay the higher taxes than any district in Newton County. And so from my understanding, the District 2 citizens, we don't get conservation exemptions. We don't get farming land exemptions. We don't get all of these additional exemptions where our property taxes are lower because we are getting all of these exemptions. And so my objective for District 2 is to provide some relief to them, because we can't get all of these additional exemptions where our taxes is $500 a year or $900 a year, $800 a year. So because we're not getting all of those exemptions, we have to figure out another way on how can District 2 citizens get some relief. And the way to do that is to focus on industry, to focus on retail, to focus on commercial, to bring in so that, there can be some relief to those citizens as well that are currently paying a higher tax base. And so what happens is when we don't focus on economic development and we don't bring in industry, now those in District 2 or those in districts that are paying higher taxes continue to pay higher taxes and never get relief. So what do we do for those citizens that are paying higher property taxes? What do we do? Do we just constantly say no to everything and then they continue to pay higher taxes? And so I think we want to look at not just our specific districts. I think we should look at the county as a whole. Let's look at the tax base as a whole and not battle on trying to find relief for one specific district. Let's try to find relief for the entire county. And let's look at strategic ways on how we can make that happen. And so I, just want us to kind of really just sit back, think about that. Yes, we are district commissioners, but I think it is our obligation to not always just focus on our district. Let's look at each other's district as a whole. For example, when the fire stations came out, it highly impacted certain districts, but not others. But District 2 commissioner stepped up to the plate and said, hey, I want to help provide relief to other districts, other citizens in other districts, so I agreed to that. And so I think when we come with something that's gonna provide relief to other citizens in other districts, let's not just discount it. Let's not just throw it away. Let's look at the whole county as a whole. Thank you.
Anyone else before we open the call for the vote?
I can say a lot of other things, but all I can tell you is you don't want to go into, and I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I thought everything was great up till 2007, and I went from being well, Frank, you know that I went from being several $1 million in the bank to zero, and it was all land speculation. I'm very careful about debt, and I'm very careful about investing in land and hoping somebody comes along and buys it, because when the market dries up, it dries up so hard you can't get rid of it. And it doesn't matter how low you drop the price on it, you can't give it away. And that's just where I'm at on debt and land and those type things. So.
Anyone else? All in favor? All opposed? It failed 4-1. So we don't need to do nothing else. Okay. I seek a motion that we postpone item 5 indefinitely. It's been motioned by Commissioner Henderson and second by Commissioner Schultz. Any discussion? All in favor? Passes 5-0. Thanks. Guys, I seek a motion that we adjourn, please. Who seconded? It's been motioned by Commissioner Henderson and second by Commissioner Mason. All in favor? We stand adjourned.